I don't know what finally broke me. Maybe it was the clink of a spoon in a too quiet room. Or maybe it was the salt on the rim of the margarita glass. I'll never forget that moment. How something so ordinary could crash down like thunder inside me. But before we get there, let me take you back, because this story doesn't begin with heartbreak. It begins with trust. And the slow, rotting silence that followed. My name's Corwin. Yeah, I know, nobody's named Corwin anymore. I've spent most of my 38 years explaining to people how to spell it. But that's not important. What matters is that 3 days ago, I walked out of a restaurant in Eastbridge, Pennsylvania, and left behind a woman I thought I'd grow old with. Her name's Lorna, 36. She teaches high school literature, the kind of person who uses the phrase emotional architecture in everyday conversation. She could recite half of Emily Dickinson from memory, and once told me she dreamed in metaphors. We met 7 years ago on a volunteer cleanup project at a city park. I was there picking up beer cans. She was photographing rusted playground swings for some urban decay art thing she was into. I made a joke about how she probably thought I was part of the trash, and she smiled. That smile lasted through our first date, then our first apartment, then our wedding. But somewhere along the way, it faded. And I didn't realize how much until it was gone. At first, it was little things. She stopped humming when she cooked. Her phone stayed face down, always on silent. She began using words like disconnected and unsustainable when talking about our relationship, like we were a failed science project. I tried. God, I tried. I bought flowers. She said it was a bit performative. I planned a weekend trip. She canceled it because she had a school board seminar. I even asked if she wanted to do counseling. She told me that therapy doesn't work when one person is pretending and the other is drowning. And somehow, I was the one pretending. Then came the dinner. It was her idea. Let's do something with my family, she said. It might ground us again. That word stuck in my throat. Ground us. Like we were two paper kites tangled in a storm, and maybe her mother's roast chicken could bring us back down to earth. So there we were, me, Lorna, her parents, her brother Delmont, and his 2 young girlfriend Kaylee, sitting at a dimly lit table in a strange little fusion place where the menu didn't have prices. I spent most of the evening smiling politely and stabbing at food I didn't recognize. No one asked how I was. No one even acknowledged I was there, except when I passed the salt. And the salt is how it began. Kaylee asked for margaritas. Everyone laughed. She was only 21, but had that exhausting confidence of someone who thought she invented flirting. The waiter brought them, rimmed with salt and lime. And that's when Lorna turned to her mother and said, with her hand resting lightly on her glass, "Isn't it funny? The only reason I haven't filed the papers yet is because I'm scared he'll cry in front of everyone." I didn't process it right away. I looked at her, then at the others. No one flinched. Her mother smirked. Delmont chuckled like it was the punchline of some inside joke. Even Kaylee gave this little pitying sigh, like she felt sorry for the guy who didn't know his own marriage was a countdown. No one looked at me. And in that moment, I became the salt. Invisible, disposable, only there to make something else taste better. I didn't speak. Didn't finish my drink. I just stood up. I pulled out my wallet, dropped 2 20s on the table, and said only 5 words. "Don't worry, I won't cry." Then I walked out. I didn't take the car. I left it for her. I walked 4 miles through the city in shoes that blistered both my heels, past shuttered stores and streetlights that hummed like they were judging me. I checked into a motel that smelled like bleach and betrayal. And I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling and thought about every moment I ignored. Every signal I dismissed. Every night she said, "I'm tired," and rolled away from me, both physically and emotionally. You want to know what happened after that? It got worse. Way worse. After that night at the restaurant, I didn't go home. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not ever again. The motel I stumbled into was one of those dim, echoey places off Route 27, the kind of place where the vending machine hums louder than the television, and where every knock on a neighbor's door sounds like it might be for you. I didn't have a bag. Just my wallet, my phone, and a weird sense of relief that I didn't have to pretend anymore. But that relief didn't last. Because silence has a way of turning the volume up in your head. And when you sit still long enough, every crack in your life starts to glow like a fault line. The next morning, I turned my phone back on. I had 11 missed calls from Lorna. 2 voicemails. Both short. The first one said, "Corwin, don't be dramatic. It was a joke. Come back. Please." The second one was quieter. "Okay. If you're not going to come home, at least text me so I know you're alive." I didn't respond. I didn't even listen to them twice. Instead, I called in sick to work, told my boss I had a family emergency. I don't know if that was true. In a way, it felt like I was the emergency. A walking collapse. A quiet explosion in khaki pants and a dress shirt that no longer belonged to anything real. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I logged into an old laptop I kept in the trunk of my car and pulled up our shared cloud account. It was something we set up early in the marriage, so we could sync grocery lists, travel photos, tax documents. Lorna never bothered to shut it down, I guess. Or maybe she forgot it existed. Or maybe she wanted me to see. Because when I clicked into the folder labeled Work 2024 Presentations, I found a hidden subfolder. It was named Always Us. At first, I thought it was something cute. Maybe something she'd made for our anniversary and just never showed me. But I was wrong. Inside were dozens of images. Screenshots. Notes. Hotel receipts. One video, thankfully blurred and silent, but still far too clear in what it implied. Her. And someone else. Not just once. Not even just recently. No. This had been going on for over a year. I stared at a photo of the two of them, Lorna and a man I didn't recognize, sitting at a beachside restaurant in what looked like Miami. Her hair was pinned up. She was wearing a dress I'd complimented her on months ago when she told me she bought it for a friend's wedding. The timestamp on the photo? That was the weekend she said she was attending a teacher development retreat. Everything inside me sank. My stomach felt like it folded into itself. My hands went cold. But I didn't throw the laptop. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Instead, I read every note she'd written to him. Lines like, "He thinks I'm with Abby this weekend. LOL. Sometimes I wonder if Corwin even notices I'm gone. We're having dinner with my family Friday. I might test the waters. Say something wild. See what he does." That one. That was it. That was the dinner. That was me. She tested the waters. And I walked away. Like a lab rat she prodded with emotional needles. But here's the worst part. Buried deep in a note dated just 3 weeks before that night, she wrote, "I feel nothing when I see him anymore. I thought maybe I'd feel guilt or pity. But it's just blank. I think that scares me more than if I hated him. You want to know what it feels like to be described as blank by the person you build a home with? It's not just heartbreak. It's annihilation. I sat in that motel room for hours after that. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because I finally realized just how long I'd been blind. How many signs I'd missed. Or worse, how many I saw and chose to ignore. And the craziest thing? I still didn't hate her. I just hated that I let myself become this invisible, harmless object in someone else's story. That night, I booked a long-term rental under a different name. Paid in cash. It was small, bare walls, mismatched furniture, the kind of place no one would think to look for me. And then I started planning. Not revenge. Not drama. Something quieter. Something final. The idea came to me somewhere between insomnia and nausea, sometime around 3:40 a.m., staring at the popcorn ceiling of the rental unit I now called home. It wasn't loud. It wasn't cinematic. It was quiet. Clean. I was going to disappear. Not in the way people do in the movies, no fake passports, no tropical islands. Just step out of the version of myself that she had reduced to a background character. I would erase the man she stopped noticing, and I would do it without a single slam door. But first, I needed closure. Not from her. I didn't want that kind of poison rolling around in my ears again. I needed it from the version of myself who thought love was enough to keep someone loyal. So I started writing. Not a letter to Lorna. Not a dramatic monologue. But a message to myself. A reminder, really. I opened a blank document on my laptop and typed just one sentence to start. "You didn't deserve what she did to you." It took me 10 minutes to write those 8 words. Not because I didn't believe them, but because somewhere deep inside, I still feared I was the reason. That I'd become boring. Predictable. Too gentle. Too forgiving. That maybe if I had been more spontaneous or less careful, she would have stayed present. But no, that's what she wanted me to think. That's what people like her depend on. They drain you, then blame you for the leak. I wrote for 3 hours. Not to vent, not to beg, but to record. Like a historian. I needed to document every time she belittled me in front of friends. Every moment she chose her phone over my voice. Every kiss that felt like an obligation. Every lie she told with a smile. By sunrise, I had 10 pages of truth. Not for anyone else. Just for me. And when I closed the laptop, I felt a strange stillness in my chest. Not peace exactly, but space. like someone had cracked open a window in a room that had been sealed for years. That same morning, I sent an email to my boss at work. I told him I was resigning immediately. No explanation. No emotion. I didn't need references. I wasn't looking for another job. Not yet. Then I turned off my phone. Not just powered down, I smashed it. Put it under a towel and hit it with the back of my skillet until the screen fractured into glittering dust. It felt ceremonial. Like I was severing the umbilical cord that connected me to every unanswered question, every humiliating second guess. For 3 days, I didn't speak to a soul. I read old books, walked quiet streets, ate in silence. I even stopped checking the clock. And then, on the 4th day, something unexpected happened. I received a letter. A real one. Paper. Envelope. No return address. The handwriting on the front was neat. Controlled. Almost too perfect. Inside, a folded sheet. One sentence, printed in dark ink. You didn't even ask who he is. No signature. No explanation. Nothing else. I read it 5 times, trying to decode the meaning. Was it from her? From the other man? From some mutual friend who thought they were doing me a favor? I didn't know. But the words stuck to my ribs like wet plaster. You didn't even ask who he is. They were right. I hadn't. I didn't want to know. I still don't. Because it wouldn't make it better. It wouldn't change what she did, or why she did it. Names don't fix betrayal. They just give you a different target to resent. Still, I couldn't shake the unease. That someone knew where I was. That someone had found me even here. So I did the only thing I could do. I burned the letter. And then I made a decision that would change everything. Burning the letter didn't fix anything, but it did make one thing clear. My escape wasn't going to be physical. It wasn't about vanishing from the map. It was about detaching from the role I had been assigned. The role of the steady, silent man who tolerated everything. I didn't want to be that anymore. I didn't want to be anything for her. Not her husband, not her fallback plan, not her emotional punching bag. Nothing. But I wasn't done watching. Not yet. The part of me that still needed answers, or maybe just wanted to witness the fallout, turned on again like an engine I thought I'd disabled. I bought a new prepaid phone, one not connected to my name, and created a new email account. Then I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I looked her up. Social media gave me the first glimpse. Her profiles hadn't changed much. Same curated posts, same hollow captions. But she was wearing the necklace I gave her 5 years ago in a recent picture. A delicate silver pendant shaped like a compass. She once said it reminded her to always find her way back home. The irony hit like a slow burn. But what chilled me was the date of the photo, taken the night after our dinner disaster. She'd posted it with the caption, "Grateful for fresh starts and honest endings." As if she had ended things. As if she were the one moving on with grace. I zoomed in on the image. She was at a rooftop bar I recognized, Lansdowne House, popular with the after-work crowd. And next to her was a hand. Just the edge of a jacket sleeve, a wristwatch, a glass of bourbon. Not tagged. Not named. Just present. Quietly, like I had once been. But I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt. I was fascinated. Because the woman in that photo, she wasn't smiling like someone who had one. She was smiling like someone trying to look like she had one. It was performance. A theater of freedom built on a foundation of shame. And she didn't know I was watching. I kept tabs over the next week. Quietly. Observing. Not obsessively, just enough to learn who she was without me. Or rather, who she pretended to be without me. I saw the quotes she posted. The empowerment mantras. The articles about emotional labor and reclaiming one's voice. I even watched her comment on a friend's post about relationships with, "Sometimes we grow out of people." Grow out of me? No. She dried me out. Used every bit of my patience, my devotion, and my blind hope until there was nothing left but the bones of a man waiting for something that would never return. But the most surprising thing came not from her page, but from someone else's. An account I didn't recognize at first. A man named Taryn Delville. Obscure name. No mutual friends. But the face struck me. He looked vaguely familiar, like someone I might have seen at one of Lorna's school fundraisers or social mixers. As I scrolled, I found more. Photos from inside her classroom. Conference dinners. A blurry selfie of Lorna and Taryn at a bookstore, captioned, "Team Building Saturday." Then, 3 weeks before our dinner, a post that stopped me cold. A table set for 2. Candles. A bottle of wine I had once bought for our 5th anniversary. And Lorna's hand, unmistakably hers, resting on his forearm. No tag. Just a caption that read, "When it's not wrong, it doesn't have to be hidden." So, that was it. The man I hadn't asked about. The one from the letter. He wasn't some stranger. He was in plain sight all along. But I didn't feel the rage I expected. No fire. Just cold. Deep and bone level. Because in that moment, I realized the truth. I hadn't lost her. She had lost me. And she didn't even realize it yet. Not until the letter I would send her. Not until the day she'd find something I left behind. Not until the person she replaced me with showed her the cost of building love on betrayal. That part was coming. And I wasn't going to raise my voice. Just the curtain. It took me a week to write the letter. Not because I didn't know what to say, on the contrary, I had too much to say. But words like these can't be written in anger, or they lose their weight. They have to be carved out slowly, like a sculpture from stone. Honest, restrained, and precise. This letter wasn't meant to beg, to threaten, or to explain. It was a record of truth, delivered not with cruelty but with clarity. I didn't want her to feel pain. I just wanted her to feel the stillness I'd been swallowed by for years, the silent void between two people who once touched with meaning and now barely shared oxygen. I printed it out. Typed. Black ink on heavy white paper. Folded it once. Slid it into a plain envelope. No return address. Just her name, written in my cleanest handwriting. I mailed it from a town over, deliberately choosing a postal drop I'd never used before. And then, I waited. Here's what the letter said. Lorna, you once told me that silence in a relationship means something's rotting. I didn't believe you then, but now I do. For years, I thought if I just stayed gentle, you'd come back. If I stayed patient, you'd notice. If I stayed loyal, you'd feel safe enough to stop running. But you weren't running from fear. You were running towards something else entirely. I know about Taryn. I know about Miami. I know about the team-building Saturdays and the hotel receipts tucked inside a folder named Always Us. I didn't hack you. You left it where I could find it, like part of you wanted to be caught. This isn't a confession. I have nothing to confess. This isn't revenge. I don't want to destroy you. This isn't a plea. I'm not asking for an apology or an explanation. This is just a mirror. Take a look. The man you think you discarded? He's not lost. He's not broken. He's free. And soon, you'll understand what that kind of freedom costs. I signed it only with my first initial. She'd know. She'd know exactly what it meant. And more importantly, what it didn't mean. The day after I mailed it, I went back to the house. Not to talk. Not even to see her. Just to pick up the last few things I had left behind, some financial documents, a small box of childhood photos, and a hand-carved wooden watch I'd made in college. She wasn't home. I didn't use my key. I knocked. Waited. Then left when no one answered. The lights were off, curtains drawn. It felt like a museum of our former life, frozen, silent, lifeless. But something strange happened when I stepped back out onto the porch. A man across the street, older, maybe mid-60s, with a veteran's ball cap, called out to me. Hey, he said, squinting at me. You her husband? I hesitated. Not anymore. He nodded slowly, then muttered, didn't think so. I turned to leave, but then I paused. Why? He looked uncomfortable, almost sorry he'd spoken at all. But after a moment, he said, you don't know me, but I've seen a lot from my front window. Different cars. Always parked 2 houses down. Sometimes overnight. Wasn't your car. My stomach turned, not from surprise, but from confirmation. He wasn't telling me something I didn't already know. He was just adding color to a picture I had already painted in shades of gray. Thanks, I said, not sure what else there was to say. He just nodded and lit a cigarette, I still fixed on the empty driveway. I drove away slowly, glancing one last time in the rearview mirror. And that's when I saw her. Pulling into the driveway, alone, her face tired, her shoulders slumped forward like the weight of something had finally settled on her spine. She picked up the envelope from the mailbox. She turned it over in her hand. And I drove on. I didn't look back again. But I knew, without seeing it, exactly what her face looked like when she read the first line. Not shocked. Not angry. Just hollow. Because deep down, she knew she hadn't just lost me. She lost herself. I thought I would feel something when I saw her open the letter. Regret. Closure. A kind of dark satisfaction. But I didn't. What I felt instead was distance. Real, irreversible distance, like watching someone through a train window as it pulls away, and knowing they'll never be part of your journey again. I didn't need to know what happened next, but part of me wanted to. She didn't call me that night. Not the next morning either. But I knew her. I knew Lorna well enough to understand she wasn't the type to rage or sob or spiral. She would strategize. For her, everything was a mental exercise. Emotion was currency, and she never spent more than she could afford to lose. On the third day, she finally broke the silence with a message I didn't expect. It came through email, sent to the new address I'd used only once, to pay a digital receipt from our joint utility account. Somehow she'd found it. Or she'd guessed it. The subject line simply read, "You got your moment. Now let me have mine." I opened it. One paragraph. Cold. Clinical. Scripted. "You're right, Corwin. I wasn't faithful. I wasn't honest. But I wasn't alone in the decay either. You stopped trying long before I started lying. And no, this isn't me deflecting. This is me reminding you that silence is a kind of violence too. I accept what you've done. I won't contest anything. But don't rewrite history and paint yourself as pure. You faded too. You just faded quieter." I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because her words hurt, but because they didn't surprise me. That was her way. Even now, even after everything, she couldn't let go of control without framing it in justification. She wanted one last edit to the story, one last insertion of her version of the truth. But it was too late for that. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My silence wasn't violent. It was the most peaceful thing I'd ever given her. 2 days later, she texted me from a new number. This time, there was no bitterness, just a question. "What do you want to do about the house?" The house. That place where we'd hosted book clubs, celebrated quiet Christmases, argued over grocery budgets and paint colors. A shell of memories, some beautiful, most quietly suffocating. I replied with a single sentence, "It's yours." Not because I was being generous. Because I didn't want it. I didn't want a single floorboard that remembered the sound of her voice. I didn't want a bedroom where I'd once begged her to talk to me and she responded by rolling over and pretending to sleep. I didn't want walls that had heard laughter turn to ice. And besides, I had already begun building something new, away from the suburbs, away from the echoes. I never expected what she sent next. A photo of our dining table. The same one from the dinner with her family. Except this time it was empty. Just a vase of wilted flowers in the center and 2 missing chairs, mine and hers. The caption below? "I tried to eat dinner here last night. I stared at your chair for 10 minutes. You never looked bigger." I read it twice. And for the first time in weeks. I almost replied. But I didn't. Because that message wasn't really meant for me. It was for her. Her way of peeling back the illusion she had worked so hard to protect. Her attempt to reclaim the emotional narrative she had lost the moment I walked out of that restaurant. She wasn't seeking reconciliation. She was seeking dignity. Proof that she hadn't just burned down something good for a few borrowed nights with a man who knew all her weak spots because he watched her build them. And Taryn? Oh, I hadn't forgotten about him. But the universe has its own sense of timing. And I would soon learn that their house of cards wasn't just unsteady, it was already collapsing. I didn't seek revenge. I didn't need it. But sometimes, truth delivers its own justice. And when it does, it doesn't come crashing in like a hammer. It drips, slow and steady, until even the most carefully crafted facade begins to rot from the inside out. It began with a message. Not from Lorna. Not from Taryn. From a woman named Bridget. I was sitting at a diner one morning, halfway through the most flavorless coffee imaginable, when my new phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line, "You don't know me, but you should." My first instinct was to delete it, another internet ghost fishing for attention. But something about the tone stopped me. I opened it. Short. Direct. No small talk. "My name is Bridget Delville. I'm Taryn's wife. I found your name connected to a digital payment he made for a hotel in Harrisburg back in April. I thought it was a mistake. It wasn't. I know everything now. About Lorna. About the messages. About the second phone. I didn't reach out to shame you. I know you're not the enemy here. I just thought you deserved to know what kind of man he is. Because he didn't just lie to you and me. He lied to all of us." I nearly dropped my cup. I reread the message 3 times. Taryn was married. Had a wife. A real, flesh and blood woman who had been living in her own mirrored version of my nightmare. And just like me, she'd stumbled upon the truth not with a bang, but with a breadcrumb. I replied within minutes. Not with questions. With gratitude. And honesty. Bridget and I exchanged emails over the next week, slowly, cautiously. She was sharp. Calm. You could tell she was holding back an emotional hurricane beneath every word. But what struck me most wasn't her pain. It was her precision. She had timelines. Screenshots. Receipts. It was like reading a dossier, not a breakup. She knew where Taryn had been on every night he said he was working late. She knew what Lorna had worn to their first hotel meeting. She even knew the scent of cologne Taryn bought in secret, because she found the empty bottle buried in his sock drawer. But one message hit me harder than the rest. Do you know what I regret the most, Corwin? It's not believing his lies. It's defending them. That line sat with me for days, because it applied to both of us. We had defended the wrong people for so long, we'd forgotten what it meant to protect ourselves. But Bridget wasn't finished. She had found something, a folder Taryn had kept on a flash drive, labeled liabilities. Inside were backups of every conversation he had with Lorna. Some were mundane, flirty, but others were cold, calculating, strategic, like two people managing an affair like a corporate merger. There were even plans for after our divorces, moving in together, combining finances, even applying for a joint teaching position in Oregon. That's when it hit me. Lorna wasn't just cheating. She was building a new life on top of the rubble of mine. But here's the twist neither of them saw coming. Bridget filed for divorce. Same day she emailed me the files. She told Taryn she'd be contacting the school board with everything, not to ruin him, but to expose the professional misconduct, the misuse of school funds for travel, the falsified receipts. It wasn't just a scandal. It was a career-ending disaster. 2 days later, I received a single text from Lorna. No greeting, no build-up, just one sentence. What did you do? I didn't reply, because I hadn't done anything. The truth did it for me. Later that night, I drove past our old house. I didn't stop, just slowed down enough to see that the porch light was off, the blinds were closed, and the driveway was empty. No signs of her, no sign of anyone. And in that moment, I felt it. Not victory, not closure, just air. Clean, breathable air. The weight that had lived on my chest for months was gone. And it wasn't because she was suffering. It was because she no longer had power over me. No more questions. No more what-ifs. Just the road ahead. A road I had built for myself. Alone. And unafraid. It's strange how healing doesn't come in one big wave. You expect it to hit you all at once. Some movie moment where everything suddenly makes sense and your heart feels light again. But it doesn't work that way. Healing shows up quietly. In parking lots. In laundromats. In grocery store aisles where no one knows your name. It builds itself piece by piece until one day, without realizing it, you stop surviving and start living again. That day came for me on a Tuesday. I was standing in line at a coffee shop downtown, the kind of place that doesn't play music and smells like fresh cinnamon and burnt beans. I've been going there more often lately, not because the coffee was good, but because it was quiet, and no one knew who I was. I like that. The anonymity. The clean slate. There was a woman in front of me, mid-30s maybe, long dark curls, wearing an oversized sweater with little coffee stains on the sleeves. She ordered an Americano and dropped her wallet trying to pull out a $5 bill. I picked it up for her. She smiled. Said, "Thanks, stranger." I smiled back and said, "You're welcome, stranger." That was it. But it was the way she looked at me actually looked. Not past me. Not through me. Just at me. With curiosity, not calculation. A flicker of connection without agenda. That night, for the first time in months, I slept without waking up. A week later, we ran into each other again. Same place. This time, she remembered my name. I'd given it to the barista the time before. She introduced herself. Mira, a freelance photographer. Raised in Illinois, just moved to town after a long-term breakup that, in her words, deserved a whole chapter in a cautionary tale. We sat at the same table, talked for nearly an hour. About life. About how people confuse comfort with happiness. About how it's easy to shrink yourself for someone else without noticing until you're too small to breathe. It wasn't a date. It was something better. It was human. Mira didn't know anything about my past. I didn't tell her about Lorna. About Taryn. About letters and motel rooms and flash drives filled with secrets. She didn't need that version of me. And maybe, for the first time, I didn't either. I didn't need to be the man who was betrayed. I didn't need to be the husband who was discarded. I could just be Corwin. Just a man sitting in the sunlight, sipping bitter coffee, making a stranger laugh. That was the beginning of something, not a love story. Not yet. Just a life. A real one. Without secrets. Without tension. Without eggshells under my feet. Lorna never contacted me again. I never contacted her. Last I heard, she resigned from the school. Something about personal restructuring. Taryn left town. His career ended quietly, like a dying light bulb. And me? I found work again at a smaller logistics company with fewer meetings and more purpose. I moved into a new apartment with creaky floors and a window that overlooks a park. I wake up with the sun. I cook my own meals. I bought a bike. I ride it. I learned how to enjoy the silence again, but this time, it's not the silence of distance. It's the silence of peace, of stillness, of freedom. I don't think about her anymore. Not with anger, not with longing, just indifference. And that, I've realized, is the most powerful kind of closure there is. So if you're reading this, and you're where I was, wondering if you'll ever feel whole again, just remember, you will. Not all at once, but one small moment at a time. One breath, one step, one stranger who sees you. And suddenly, you're not broken anymore. You're free.